David Whiting, and I'm a ministry strategist with Horizons Stewardship. Horizons Stewardship exists to make disciples and fund ministry. Every church wants to make disciples. And when you make disciples and you want to make more disciples, you'll need funding to make more disciples because you want to hire staff, you want to improve your facility, you want to fund new ministries. And so we love to come alongside churches that are making disciples and helping them fund their ministry. And there's a wonderful momentum that occurs that when you make more disciples, those more disciples can become better disciples, and better disciples submit to Jesus even in their finances, which allows you to fund more ministry so you can make more disciples. We love helping churches who want to make disciples and help them fund their ministry. Now, this video is about this idea of asset utilization or asset stewardship for your church. Maybe you clicked on this video because you're already doing it and you just want to think through more of the implications and ideas and questions you might have surrounding asset stewardship. Perhaps you're watching this video because you've heard of other churches doing it and you're just wondering what it's all about. This video contains 3 parts. The first part is just asking the question, why would we consider asset stewardship for the church? And also, what are some benefits of it? The second video, then, we'll look at the big picture. How do we view this from 30,000 feet? What are the categories we think about? And then we'll break it down into 4 big categories of ways you could think about utilizing your assets. And then finally, we'll look at some of the implications and challenges as you move into asset stewardship for your church. So let's ask this question. Why even consider asset stewardship? There's 3 reasons. The first is it's just reasonable. It's just reasonable. I say that because often churches are cash poor and facility rich. Churches often need more cash so they can make disciples, and they often have amazing facilities. And this goes along with a second thought of this, that often churches are vastly underutilized. The facilities are underutilized. The Cooperative Baptist Fellowship claims that 32% of a church facility is used even on a Sunday. And maybe that's because they were built in an era of classes and Sunday schools. And so they have all these classrooms. And now we've moved into the era of community groups or small groups in homes. And so churches are often cash poor and facility rich and underutilized. And we think that this idea of stewardship is not just a command for individuals to consider. We think it's a principle for churches too. So we think it's reasonable to at least consider it. We also think there are spiritual thoughts and ideas involved. There are 3 passages of the Bible that I think of. The first is the feeding of the 5,000. There were 5,000 men plus women and children that needed fed, and Jesus said, let's feed them. And the disciples said, how? What do you have? And what did they have? They had 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And they gave those meager assets to Jesus, who did amazing things with those meager assets. The second passage I think of is the parable of the talents. You remember which servant was condemned? It was the one who took the assets, the gifts they'd been given, and they buried them. And they wouldn't use them for greater purposes. That was the servant who was condemned. There's a verse in 1 Peter 4, verse 10, and it says this, use whatever gift you have received. Notice that. If you have something, you've received it. And you're to use it to serve others. And so even the assets we have been given to us by God to serve others. And when we do that, then we are being faithful stewards or faithful managers of God's grace, not just faithful managers of our assets. We're faithful stewards or managers of God's grace in an incredible variety of ways and forms. So we think it's reasonable. We think there are spiritual implications and ideas around this. And thirdly, it's just practical. For a church that's struggling, let's say that your budget is in decline, your attendance is in decline, and your costs are increasing. What is a church going to cut? There's really 3 options. You can cut salaries and benefits, you can cut ministries, or you can cut facility expenses. Well, if you try to cut salary and benefits, well, no one wants to do that. No one wants to lose the staff they currently have to work the ministries and to equip God's people for works of service. No one wants to cut salaries or benefits. You could cut ministry expenses, but that's the very reason the church exists. And you're going to cut property costs? Well, those usually aren't flexible. So when you have to cut because money is down, attendance is down, it can make you feel desperate. And we think desperation can lead to innovation. So it's reasonable, it's spiritual, and it's practical. Here's 3 brief benefits of asset utilization. The first is it can generate needed income. Then a lot of churches need that desperately. But beyond that, it can further the mission of your church in incredibly creative ways. And finally, it can allow you to share resources with like-minded ministries. It can allow you to bless your community, and you can be even a better neighbor to those around you. So that's why you should begin to at least consider this. As you consider asset stewardship, I want to give you a big picture thought just to how to place your mind around how to think about it, and then we'll look at some detailed ways you might be able to utilize your facility. To do that, I want to make a drawing for you. So I want to make a little bit of a quadrant. So let me draw this. And we'll make our quadrant here in the middle. And at the bottom, we'll call this profitability. And we long for that to rise, to go up. And on this side of the quadrant, we'll label this impact, rising impact that we always want. So in the 4 quadrants here, let me label each of them. Well, if you're at the bottom left-hand corner, that means you have your assets. You're trying to think of a way to utilize your assets, but it's low impact for your mission and it's not very profitable. In the upper left-hand corner, it's high impact, but you're not generating any income from it. In the lower right-hand quadrant, it has high profitability, but it's not really on mission for what you're trying to accomplish. And in the upper right-hand corner, it's utilizing your assets and you make high profitability. It helps you generate income and funding, and it's making a missional impact. So let's label each of these. We'll start with the positive and then the negative. On the positive side, if you have low impact and low profitability, there is a positive there. And the positive is you might just be getting started. And that's okay. If you have, when you begin getting started utilizing your assets and your facilities, if you're not making much of an impact and you're not making much money, that's okay. You're just getting started. On the negative side, this becomes negative if it's low impact and low profitability over a period of time, because you have to ask, is this worth it? It takes time, it takes effort, it takes money. Is it worth it? If you go to the upper left-hand corner, if you have low profitability, but it's making an impact ministry-wise, well, the positive there is you have missional impact. That's what you want. On the negative side, if money is crucial, if that's why you got into this idea of utilizing your facility, then it's not doing that. You're fulfilling your mission even better, but it's not profitable. On the lower right-hand side, now imagine it's not making much of a missional impact, but it is making a profit. Well, on the positive side, this truly helps with finances. That's a massive benefit. On the negative side, it can get really frustrating if there's no fruit. Yes, you're making money, but that's not why you got into pastoring. It's not why you got into church work. So it can get frustrating. One more. If you have high missional impact and high profitability, well, this is obvious. This is the very goal. This is ideal. It's what you want. It's what you long for. But there's a negative here too. And the negative side is it does take time. It takes money. It takes energy to be able to do it. And it can get distracting. So there's a good way to think of it big picture. As you think about how to utilize your assets, you want to think about it from that angle. The angle of what impact can it make or is it making? Can it be profitable? Is it profitable? Let's begin looking at it at a very specific level. To whom could you rent your facilities? I would think about it in this way. You could rent to ministries from outside groups that share your mission. That would be ideal. It's not you doing the work, but you're renting it to those who share your very mission. Secondly, you could rent it to ministries from outside groups that have a distinct but a non-contradictory mission to yours. Or thirdly, you could rent it to businesses or individuals that need space, and that can be being a good neighbor, and it can help the church financially. So what are the options? Let's consider 4 options. There's the option of facility rental, community connections, missional partnerships, and land, selling part of your land or leasing part of your land. Let's look at each one. We tend to only think of a couple of specific ways, but I'm going to mention dozens, and there are hundreds. Let's start with facility rental. You could rent your facility for weddings or receptions. You can rent your facility for office space. Perhaps that could be needed. You could rent your facility to a church plant that needs worship space on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon or evening. You could rent classrooms for meetings or for birthday parties, anniversaries, outside groups that need a place for them to meet. You can rent your facility. Beyond that, there are community connections that can help build relationships with the community. You could put a coffee shop in your church. Most of us know of churches that have a coffee shop that's not just open on Sundays, but it's a third space for people to use and can even then allow you to bring in income for your church and ministries. Parking lot rental. There's a church we've worked with in Phoenix that their parking lot, they went through a very difficult time as a church. The church plummeted in attendance and finances, and they had a massive facility. And they began to think, how can we utilize our facility to be more effective? Now, since then, their church has gotten back to it's growing and it's doing really well, but they continually use their assets for the church to fund more ministry. And the most profitable is when they rent their parking lot. Every Saturday morning and every Wednesday morning, there's a woman who runs a farmer's market. And a large section of their large parking lot is filled with vendors who come. And every Saturday morning they set up and people come and it's a business for her. And then she pays the church and she cleans up. The church has very little work to do with it. It's really incredible. This same church also, it's in the Phoenix area. There's a college football bowl game that happens in Phoenix every year. And it's the staging place, the starting place for the parade. They pay the church. It's a wonderful way to generate income and utilize the assets you have for the community. Also, maybe churches, there are many that put in playgrounds. You don't charge for them, but it's a way to be a good neighbor. Maybe you have sports fields that neighbors could use or that other schools or clubs could rent and provide income. Food trucks. There are churches that once a week or once a month, and maybe they start with once a quarter, food trucks come in. And so people are coming onto the church property and then those food trucks then pay the church to be able to base out of there on that one day a week. There are churches that have incredible gym facilities, not just a gymnasium for basketball or indoor soccer, but they have a massive weight room and a cardio room with elliptical machines and treadmills. And people in the community can pay a monthly fee to utilize those facilities. Other churches they use their gym as a rental for basketball or indoor soccer. There are lots of ways that you could do this. What about missional partnerships? Maybe you run a daycare or a preschool, or you have a food pantry, maybe even a clothing closet, a medical clinic. The church my wife and I are a part of, we have a medical clinic right on site, and we employ a full-time doctor, a part-time doctor, a full-time nurse, and a full-time administrator. And then there are hundreds of medical professionals in our community that volunteer once a week, once a month, once a quarter, and people could come to our medical clinic and be treated for absolutely no cost. It's people that don't have insurance or vitally uninsured, or their copay or their or what they have to pay, their deductible is so large they just can't afford it. It's an incredible missional partnership. It's a ministry of our church, and it builds incredible relationships in the community. It provides no income for our church, but that's not why we did this. Some of these you might do because you need income. A medical clinic or a clothing closet typically isn't that. Maybe there's office space you could provide for small ministries in your area that desperately need office space. A counseling center that can utilize your facilities and you rent rooms to them to run their counseling center. A homeschool co-op or a Christian or private school if you have classrooms and enough facilities. Maybe again, worship space for a church that can't afford it, but you'll partner with them missionally to be able to utilize their building. Or again, classrooms for ministries that you just want to provide for them to be able to meet together. Beyond that, there's land. Maybe you sell part of your land. Many churches own way more land than they need, or they can lease part of their land. Put on a senior adult residential facility that there will need to be more and more of those in the coming years. There's churches that rent part or lease part of their land for a cell phone tower or affordable housing, or they're near a highway and they put up a billboard. There's a church we know of that has a massive land and they put a solar farm in there. They lease it out and it provides energy for the community. There are many, many options, whether it's issues of land or missional partnerships or utilizing facilities for rental or community connections. Maybe there's only one or two things you've thought of. We encourage you to stop and consider, how could you utilize your facility for better stewardship? Utilize your assets to be able to fund ministry and fulfill the mission and to be a good neighbor. If you're going to utilize your assets, if you're going to steward your assets well, there are many implications and then some challenges. I want to help you look at it with another drawing. So let me draw something for you. I'm going to use a little coaster we have here to be able to do it. We'll start with a red circle here. And then next to that, I'll put a blue circle. I'm sorry, a green circle. That's not blue. And then to finish this Venn diagram, I will add a blue circle. Okay, so you're familiar with Venn diagrams. Now, when it comes to asset stewardship, I want you to think about it in three areas that we long to come together to find this middle space. And here are the three areas. The first is missional impact. This is what we long for. If we're going to utilize our facilities, it would be ideal if it creates a missional impact. Of course, to do that, we need usable assets. And then the final category, not just missional impact, not just usable assets, we also would long for fiscal profitability. Now, this, in the middle of the Venn diagram, this is the goal. This is what we long for. It's when missional impact and usable assets and fiscal profitability all come together. But often they don't. Often you only get two of these. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So let's start with this. If you have this amazing idea that you know would be fiscally profitable and you know would have massive missional impact, but you don't have usable assets, well, what you have here, the question you ought to ask is this realistic? Because that's kind of just a dream. So maybe someday you'll be able to do it, but if you have this great idea for fiscal profitability, you'd have amazing missional impact, but you don't have usable assets, it's not realistic. So wait, just keep dreaming, but you are just dreaming. But imagine if you have something that has great missional impact and you have usable assets, it's making an impact, but it doesn't have fiscal profitability. You have to ask a different question. And this question is, can we afford it? Can we afford to have this utilizing the assets in a way that makes a missional impact, but is not providing more funding? Can we afford it? Now, if you have usable assets and it's creating incredible profitability for you, but it's not necessarily impacting your mission, that's where you have to ask, is it worth it? The goal is to be in the middle right here, where missional impact and usable assets and fiscal profitability comes together. Then you've nailed it and you can grow with it. But if it's only two of those three, it can create unique challenges. So let me have you consider some implications. The first implication is cost. It costs you to be able to utilize your facility. There's going to be added utilities. There's going to be maintenance. There's going to be renovations perhaps that are needed for people to be able to use it well. And then it's going to have an impact on your own staffing. There's going to be cleaning. There might be setup and tear down. So there's a cost implication. Secondly, insurance. You have to check with your insurance. Do you have proper coverage for what they want to use the facilities, how they want to rent your facility? Is your liability enough for rental and usage? Thirdly, there's the well-known UBIT, which is unrelated business income taxes. And you have to talk to your tax advisor on this because it's different in every state. But if you're receiving income for using your facilities in most states, or all states probably, there's going to be some income tax implications. It doesn't mean it removes your tax exempt status, but you do have to pay income taxes for that usage. Make sure you talk to your lawyer and tax advisor on that. There's zoning restrictions and permit requirements perhaps with this. Make sure you think about those implications. There's your own church governing bodies and denominational approvals, and then there's child safety policies. Is there children involved? Are they following your policies? Who's regulating it? There are a lot of implications to consider. This doesn't just happen easily. There are also some challenges that are created. Shared space always brings tension, always. So you got to be aware of that. If you grew up with a sibling and you shared a room, you know that shared space always brings tension. Secondly, it could be a challenge to determine fair rental value. And do you want it fair market rental value? Do you want to offer it a discount? How do you decide that? That's a challenge. Thirdly, patience is required. No matter how ideal it is, even if your missional impact is great and you have the facilities and is bringing in fiscal profitability, there will be patience that's required. And finally, be aware of this. Shared space can create significant sideways energy for the church. Here's what I mean. You have a mission. You're pursuing that mission. As you utilize your facilities, perhaps for more income to fund ministry or to simply partner with an outside group or to be a better neighbor, it takes time and energy and effort. And that can often be sideways energy and can distract you from the very purpose of your church. So just be aware, it can create a challenge of sideways energy. Make sure you count the cost. Let me end with 3 thoughts and 3 questions. Number 1, hope is not a strategy. Don't say we have a challenge, we have a fiscal challenge. I know, we'll simply rent our facilities. Well, it can happen, but there are a lot of challenges and a lot of work to do because asset stewardship doesn't just happen on its own and it doesn't happen easily. So number 3, start small, be clear, get help. You might have a big idea. We encourage you start small and then be really clear with those you're allowing to use or rent or lease your facility. Be really clear, even in a written form and document. And then get help. Although you may see a clear pathway, we would encourage you. Utilize some people who've done it before. Call other churches. Utilize some kind of outside agency that can be of help to you in getting this going. 3 final questions. Number 1, are you even open to utilizing your church assets for income and or mission purposes? Are you open to it? Number 2, what do you have that could be utilized? What are your 5 loaves and 2 fishes? And finally, how can we help? If there's a way we can help you walk through this, we could just be a conversation partner for you. Or maybe you'd want to enter a more formal relationship and we can be consultants with you to help you think through how to do this well and how to take the facilities you have, utilize them to further your mission and perhaps to better fund ministry. May God bless you as you attempt to make more disciples and even better disciples for the glory of God, the good of your community, and for your own great joy. God bless you.